Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. For a second, I was like, what day of the week it is? We're going live on Wednesday. I'm so excited to have the conversation that we're having, to have the guests that we're having. Tonight, we are talking about the surveillance, the role of policing in the Black community, how it impacts our Black youth, our queer youth, our community. And we want to give people who would consider themselves family, caregivers of Black youth, parents of Black youth, some tools to act in preparation of the summertime. We know that kids are out of school, and so we want to make sure that we give people the things that they need to be able to have a summer where they don't hopefully experience major travesties. All right. So my guest tonight is Nicole, and I'm just realizing that I have been withholding an L from spelling your name, Michelle. When you get here, I'm going to have to give you a public apology about that. I wonder why I did that. But we are going to have a somewhat heavy conversation. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, welcome. Oh,
Yes,
welcome. Welcome to me. You
welcome back.
hosted me. Welcome back. Hey.
I don't know why I've been taking away an L from your name. I've only made you one Michelle. You're two Michelles. I'm
I
sorry.
am. I am. I
Oh,
am. But it's okay.
okay. So listen, I'm gonna get into it. Hopefully more people will join us. Um, and I thought that I would start this off a little different. We're obviously gonna introduce you to the group, and then I wanted to share a few personal stories to give some like real kind of, again, lived experience acknowledgement of what this conversation can mean. So
hmm
I invited you to this conversation because of the levels of embodied knowledge you have around the conversation dealing with crime and policing in the community. So share what those levels of knowledge are.
Sure, sure. So I'm Michelle Nicole. I am a queer Black woman. I am a wife. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York. I am also a criminologist and racial justice educator. So I began this work studying policing and the criminal legal system and really how it impacts our communities and our most marginalized communities. And looking at how we can actually build communities that are safe and that are free from aggressive policing that creates more harm. Not only have I studied criminal justice and policing in the criminal legal system, I've also grown up in a law enforcement household. So I have learned and firsthand seen, right, the ways that police culture operates within our communities and what their priorities are, and how they do not keep us safe, right, and actually contribute to harm. So with all of that background, right, as I went from, learning about the system from a childhood and from, my dad telling me as a kid, you know, um, always make sure that don't argue, don't fight with, don't get in any type of interaction or in any situation with a police officer because you will always lose. And I'm like, hey, what do you mean? Like, aren't they supposed to, be the good guys, right? As a kid, you're growing up internalizing these lessons, right, about cops and robbers and who's good and who's not. And but he was very clear, right, on the fact of knowing how the institution operated, what they cared about, and how they would see me, right, as as a young Black girl, even, and even having still social privileges that protected me from some harm. He still knew it was necessary to let me know that this institution, right, can cause you harm, and so you need to protect yourself from it, really, even though we're taught that this agency is supposed to protect us.
I mean, what a level of cognitive dissonance, right? I would imagine. I mean, I don't know your dad, but
hmm
to probably be someone who was very committed to their job, there, like, moving in integrity and
Mm-hmm.
showing up and doing the best work that he could do, and simultaneously him also being aware
Mm-hmm.
that even within, I mean, I don't want to call it industry, but right, even within his industry, even his field, and amongst his colleagues, they couldn't be trusted.
Right.
A lot
Right.
in my mind, and I guess the only similarity, it's not the same, but the only thing I
Mm-hmm.
from is when I was a college professor, like those instances where I saw my colleagues like wilding out in various ways, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
gosh, like,
Right.
what are y'all doing to And
Right.
it's a sense of professional cognitive dissonance. That's how I would name
Oh yeah, definitely. And obviously my father, well, not obviously, but my father was a black man. And so um he was also, right, if he did not have that badge, right, he would have also been a target of that institution. And so he operated as a detective. And so mainly, right, he wasn't with the, as he kind of called, like the lowers, the patrol officers, who are really the front line officers that we commonly come in contact with, right? And from growing up with him and, right, hearing these things, and also, right, hearing and seeing, right, the firsthand police violence and police mistreatment, not only in communities that my family and that my cousins were a part of, but also on TV, right? I remember being a little girl and watching the killing of Amadou Diallo play out, right? I forgot what year that was, 97, 98, right? And seeing that the brutality, right, that man endured,
it.
and
It was
in
1999, and
1999.
he was 23 years old. He received 41 bullets.
Yes, yes, 41 bullets. Um, so that's, the context I grew up in, and seeing that, right? But my father, he was always really focused, as a detective, of, I guess, knowing, right, how the system operated. He's like, I need to, depart from that in some ways, and I want to commit to treating people with respect. And he always professed this, as he calls it, the golden rule, right? You treat people how you want to be treated, right? And so that was a really important, ideology for him. But also, he was a part of this institution whose mission and mandate is not about real safety, right? And so the views that we have, and we'll get into this, but when you believe and you have a view that is shaped in thinking that certain people who engage in truly harmful behavior, right, but then you make the connection that as a result they're no good, as a result we should devalue them, as a result, like, bad behavior translates into you're no good. Well, that is a problem as well, and those ideas contribute to the harm and the violence that we then see, right, when people are engaged in harmful behavior, right, in a community, or if they're just suspected of it as well. And so that's why it needs to be dismantled, because it's not helping any of us, right?
Mm. So I want to name the fact um, that I don't think neither of us came into the space to like lead with what I would call trauma porn. But I do want to make space for the fact that this conversation can be triggering, right? Just hearing
Mm-hmm.
like the word police can create a lot of responses in
Yeah.
your body. So I just want to name that. I want to honor that. Um, we don't have a desire to parade around the violence and brutality. And
Mm-hmm.
we can tag up to the conversation, but I think so often we're so used to having to lead with our trauma to convince people to have some compassion for us. And so
Right.
I want to, especially when I start thinking about these family talks, whenever I'm in an audience that's predominantly Black or brown, I always have to remind myself, like, hey, well, first of all, I don't lead with trauma with white folks, to be honest. I stopped doing that
Mm-hmm.
because I realized this is not effective. You know,
Mm-mm.
and again, we could have that conversation another day.
Right.
How
Right.
do we need to see, like, you know what I'm saying? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in this space in particular, I just want to let people know that we don't have a desire to do that. We all
Yeah.
stories. So there were like three things that I wanted to kind of root my experience of this conversation in. Maybe, I think it was before the death of Breonna Taylor. I want to say it was 2019, I think. And I was in the house and we were on the porch. And my mom lives in a very working class neighborhood, you know? And some new people had moved into the neighborhood. They were young people, how my mom and them would say, them young folks, you know? And it was a substantial amount of noise. It's like, I mean, I ain't even gonna lie, you know, whatever. And my mom, like, that's it. That's it. I'm tired. They just moved in, blah, 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 blah. I'm about to call the cops. And I'm like, no, ma'am. And that's the first time I can recall, like, strategically saying, what are our other options? Right. And at first, my mom was taken aback, right? Again, my mom's like a baby boomer Black woman, grew up in the South. So at first she was like, what do you mean? I'm like, Mom, are there any other things we could do besides? So that's the first story. The second story I want to say is I'm a speeder. I don't got no respect for, I'm just going to keep it. Unless residential school zones. Those are the two places where I'm like, okay, I'll get this, you know, this 30. I'll do this 30 here. Okay. But the house, for the kids. For the kids and for the neighborhood. I'll do this 30. Okay. But how speed limits are for bitches. What is we doing? Okay. And I have been pulled over. And in all of those instances, I have used my proximity to whiteness. Yes. Yes. To have the negotiation. Oh, yeah. Girl, I'll be quick to be like, I teach at. Don't hurt me. Yep. I'm one of the good ones. I'm one of the good ones. Right? And we definitely get that privilege as women as well, right? But yeah, there are other factors to leverage as well. So I've utilized my proximity to white to help negotiate my, like, any kind of engagement with police officers. The third thing, and that wasn't a flex. I wasn't saying that to be like, oh no, well, you get to say where you work at. I have a card, boo boo. Oh, excuse me, retired detective here, daughter. See, I'm part of the blue, right? I'm part of the blue line, okay. And right, exactly. I ain't gonna tell my age, but I'm Generation X. I mean, Black don't crack. So I but I was a child watching police chase O.J. Simpson. Me too. Yeah. And I remember just being like, because even as a kid, I was like, it felt like it was like 20 cars. Right? And then I don't remember as well as the Rodney King. I don't remember seeing the video, but I remember the reaction. And I share all that to say, as a Black woman, I've always known that police weren't safe. Always. No one explicitly told me. You know, no one ever set me down. Like, so I'm thinking about that in the context of like what your dad did to you. I never had that conversation. But just by way of social conditioning and a Black person in the anti-Black world, I just always knew not to trust that. And so in 2020, when we had that triage of state murders, it was very weird to hear people say things like they were surprised. Like, that was really unsettling, because I was like, huh? Really? I mean, okay. And I feel like it was important to say that at the top of the conversation that we have multiple realities.
Mm-hmm.
and multiple experiences of the same group of people in this case.
Right.
And so I just want to affirm that for Black people who, again, who are triggered, who have a lot of feelings. I get it, right? Like,
And also, right, and also those of us who have been still protected by that system, who have maybe been able to use our proximity to whiteness in terms of our education, in terms of our friend group, in terms of the neighborhoods that we live in, right? And maybe we were protected a little bit from the harms of policing compared to other folks within our community, right? We could all have varying
so
experiences.
let's start there, right? Let's start.
Okay.
We can start with me. We don't have to start with you. Well, I mean, you did mention you had a card, so you had a card. I was walking
Right.
around telling people my show and my work ID.
Yeah.
What if people don't have that same amount of proximity?
Well, we know why we use it, right? Because we know that there are benefits to using it. We know that there's protection, and so when you don't have those elements, right? The mandate one of policing is about controlling certain groups of people. And the certain groups of people are people who have are assumed or who have been deemed to be likely to, be dangerous, right? These people are dangerous. These people are no good. These people are violent, right? But what happens is that this idea of who fits into that box of likely to be dangerous, likely to be no good, right, is heavily racialized, right? And so how police view us and view our community members is not indiscriminately, right? Their view when they pull over, right, someone who is Black, right, and if we're talking about also elements, and we're in this conversation of not only our Black youth but queer youth, right? Because right there's intersections here, right? You can have Black queer youth as well, right?
Black,
And
Black and queer, yeah.
right, depending on how they're presenting their gender or elements of their dress or look that may resonate with a certain sexual orientation. There's also, right, an idea, shapes, prejudices shape how police view us in terms of the value that we have, the level of humanity that they're willing to give us, right? And how they view us as a threat or not. And threat doesn't always have to mean a physical threat, right? But that's what's the language that's used. Like this person was maybe I was afraid or threatened by them, right? They're essentially, right, to say it's plainly, right, officers, we know from the research, from loads of research, not only, you know, actual evidence from police officers' mouths, but from arrest reports and things like that, we know that police are more likely to approach car stops, right, with citizens who are Black in a very different way than they are with when they are white. Different meaning more aggressive, more on alert, more assumptive, basically assuming
Yeah.
that we are going to engage in some level of violence against them or that we are engaged in some crime, right? And that's why we see such vast disparities, right, in police stops and police, arrests, assuming that we have drugs in the car, we have guns, and we have this, right? I mean, when you think about the New York City policy of stop and frisk, right, that was used in an effort, and it was purported to say, we want to keep you all safe, so we need to proactively find the people in your communities who have the guns, who have the weapons, right? And so we're going to do these stops based on our police minds and our understanding of who's likely to be dangerous. But what did we find out from that policy? We knew that it actually was not effective in stopping significant gun violence, and that police were significantly more likely to stop Black and brown people in our communities, but less likely to find guns on us. So let me say that again. They were more likely to stop us, to harass us, to arrest us. But when they did stop to frisk us and to assess whether or not we actually had a weapon or had guns or had drugs on us, they were less likely to find them on Black citizens, right? And so what happens when we don't have the protection of positioning ourselves with whiteness? Well, then that means you're likely to be viewed as a threat.
Yeah. I think it's important to really use this right now to kind of talk about that history specifically as it relates to the enslaved folks, right? Because I think a lot of people don't realize. I think a lot of them think like police just like, you know, like people were given badges and guns randomly like in 1972 or some shit. So can you expand on why and how we have police here in the United States?
For sure, for sure. So this could be a whole masterclass in itself, and I have them, I've taught them, but I'm gonna give you all the quick rundown.
I want the people.
Give the people a quick rundown of understanding, right? Because to be able to understand how policing operates today, we cannot separate it from its original mission and mandate, right? Like, would you go to a restaurant that says, hey, we are soul food restaurant, like we have the best catfish, the best greens, the best mac and cheese, okay? And you like, oh yeah, okay, let me, oh, when were they created? Where, you know, what's the history here? Oh, well, in 1965, we started out and we were an Italian restaurant that specialized in pasta. And yeah, but now we're here. You're going to be like, what kind of mac and cheese am I about to get? Like, is this a fusion situation? Like, what's going on here? So
is there some marinara somewhere up in here?
Like, what's going on, right? So this is, you know, that's obviously, you know, ridiculous of analogy, but hopefully, you know, I want to kind of frame it in that of, we can't look at the police today and say, hey, they're an institution that will create safety and protection in our community when, and right, and I mean, they had this all over their paraphernalia, all over their, you know, cars. They have these mandates that say, you know, to protect and serve, right? But who are they protecting and serving is really the question. And so police originated, right, before there was any official police agency, police, you know, a police house or what have you, a station house in any capacity, before people had badges and guns, right? What were the police? Well, let's take it all the way back. Let's take it back to the very beginning in the colonization of what's now known as the United States, right? So 1607, we have the establishment of Jamestown, right? So I want to put that in your mind. 1607, that's when things pop off, right? Colonizers come over here. They're like, let's snatch it up, right? 1619, go ahead.
Got to acknowledge, and they came over and people were living their best life. Native indigenous folks were living their best life.
Exactly.
There is no 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's some bullshit.
No.
So I just have to really name that. People were living and living full before Jamestown came over.
Indigenous Americans, First Nation people were living here, right, in their land, and colonizers came over to steal from it, to theft, right, and to mistreat, to abuse, to berate the people who were there for financial gain, right? And from that time, right, the establishment of this nation, right? The first colony that actually, you know, stayed and didn't disappear. That's another story. So when the 1607, right, by 1619, then we have the first enslaved Africans who are brought over, right, and enslaved, and part of this now created this system of enslavement, which then goes on to become an enslavement system solely based on race. Right? So this is how servitude is now defined, right? So slavery.
Google John Punch, y'all. Google John Punch.
Yes.
That tonight, but just Google him.
Okay. I appreciate you jumping in there. So enslavement, right? It all goes back to slavery, right? Doesn't it always? So if we go back to this institution, right, that's developing in the 1600s, 1700s, right? All throughout the 1700s and the creation of America, right? The colonizers, they were not used, there were no official police agencies. They weren't even really using, they weren't even having like official judges and things like that in court proceedings. They were relying on common English law, right, back from England. But and then as America is founded in 1776. Okay, so we're in the 1700s, right? But now we still got this system of enslavement, right? And we have people in communities who are fighting against this. They say, hey, no, this isn't right. I want to be free. I want to experience true freedom. And also we had some white brothers and sisters, right, who are part of this movement as well to, abolish slavery as an institution.
But
so
too, just like
say it again.
But that also was complicated because all of them wasn't like, because we believe in Black people living their best life.
Yes, of course. That
the boy Abraham Lincoln wasn't on some, we want Black people to be full.
No, that was not the mission. Yes, but I'm just getting us there. So, okay. Okay.
So there was some white people on the same side of history. Got it.
Right. So 1776, America's founded, right? This is late 1700s. We're though having strife against this establishment of enslavement, right? Now we're into the 1800s, right? And at this point, the conflict is at its highest point, right? America is now, one of the last industrialized, countries to still use enslavement, right? And rely on this brutal system. And so from the 1800s, basically, when you had, in the 1800s, that's when the tension and the crisis is like to a pinnacle point. That's where you then have and see the establishment of official police agencies. But before they were official, right? Before they were official, these people were operating as, one, in the South, they operated as people who were patrolling enslaved people, right? Also known as slave patrols. So slave people, white men, let me be specific, right? White men, many times landholding white men, were responsible for maintaining the control in the community, which control and safety in that time meant that slaves stayed in the position of a slave, right? And instead of viewing these African people as true humans, right? They're just property. And so we need people to basically regulate them to that status, right? And so as there's a fight against this, right? As there is a fight for liberation, that is when we then see the establishment and the official creation of police agencies. It goes from this informal slave patrols in the South, right? And in the North, they were not immune, right? Before they were police officers, they were actually, again, well-off white men, many land-holding white men who were responsible for basically controlling Eastern European immigrants, right, who were not viewed as white. So Eastern European immigrants and also white folks who were abolitionists, right, going against indigenous, viewed anyone who was deemed to be other and outside of the dominant systems and structures were policed, right, by these white men in the North. Then we see in 1838 the first establishment of an official police organization. So these organizations began not because there was crime in our communities and everyone was unsafe. It was to make sure that there was a control mechanism in place to keep enslaved people in their second class position, right? And once enslavement was abolished, right, then we see the influx of and just this institution working as a design. Okay, Black people are free now. They're no longer deemed to be slaves, but now we have this institution that's responsible for criminalizing their everyday behavior, right? They're everyday. I mean, in the South, there were laws, right, after the Emancipation Proclamation. They and Black people were, you know, free from this enslavement system. You had it where there were laws created to still try to regulate, because, right, the 13th Amendment says, you know, we're abolishing slavery except if you are punished, right, for a crime. And so that is the loophole. And through that loophole, they say, well, then all we need to do is criminalize Black folks. Because once we find them guilty of a crime, once we arrest them for that, now we're able to put them back in that enslavement system. And so you had laws, for example, in the South coming up where if a Black man or a Black, you know, any Black person was walking around, right, in an area that they were, you know, deemed to not be in, right, that is like, oh, you're not supposed to be where you're at. They created these loitering laws, right? And these laws were a part of Black codes that basically regulated Black folks to certain positions and certain areas within our communities. So those men were able to police, right? Free Black people now, no longer enslaved, but now there's an institution who's telling me that I can't walk around, I can't hang out, because that in itself is a crime. And so we have to understand that the mandate and the origins of policing has always been about targeting, about controlling, and about criminalizing the most marginalized people in our communities. And that typically means Black, brown, queer folks, immigrants, right? People who operate, people also living in poverty, right? By economic status, people who are not part of the dominant systems and structures. Policing is not about how policing defines safety. It defines it according to the white patriarchal, you know, cis lens. That when they define what is safe, who is likely to be safe, and who as a result needs to be controlled. So policing was not created in our, one, it hasn't been, you know, like since forever, since 1607, or even since 1776. Policing only began and was, you know, official, right before the abolishment of slavery. Right, so we have to really think about that contextual element here, and how police have consistently operated throughout history from that time, from the 1800s till the later 1800s to, you know, early 1900s, and the increased action of the Ku Klux Klan, right, and how many of the law enforcement officers, the sheriffs, right, were also a part of that racist terrorist organization.
Similar to how many of our congressional officers, congressional members are associated with that organization. I just want to pause here to be really clear about something. Two things in particular. Policing as it exists right now is anti-Black.
Yes.
Recognize the full humanity of Black folks across the diaspora. You can't legislate that. You can't reform that, right? I want to be clear. Policing in its very nature, and based off the history that you share with us so beautifully, is anti-Black, full stop. And then how can we as Black folks in the community expect to be protected by an entity that doesn't even know how to protect us? And part of the reason why it doesn't know how to protect us is because it wasn't created to protect us, right?
Wasn't created to, they're not incentivized to protect us. That is not their mission.
And so going back to that story I shared earlier, when I tell my mom, are there other options? Because the institution, the goal line has never been to protect Black life, to honor Black life. It can, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I mean, like, in a sense that, what do you expect Black people, like, even the good cops amongst us, the institution doesn't frame us as being people worth protecting. So I just want
Right.
to make that really explicit.
Right. And that's an important point too, because you'll definitely hear conversations around, oh, well, there's a couple good officers, or, there's some community policing over here. But again, what you have to recognize is the larger systems at play, because knowing one or two or five or even 10 good officers means nothing in the context of hundreds, in the context of thousands across the US. Right?
That's the very framework of the institution.
When that good officer goes back to his institution, right? How is he being, celebrated? How is he being rewarded? What bonuses is he gaining, or are they gaining from their activities, right? If they're only being celebrated and promoted, right, when they arrest more people, right, when they target more people, when they surveil more people, then it is very difficult to operate in that institution and still be good, to still actually, let me calm down. Forget good.
Because you need a church fan. I'm going to transition this with.
You see, I get too excited.
Listen,
because we were so, within our community as well, even though we have been brutalized by this institution, we're still, so we still expect, like you said, in some ways, for it to act in a way that it has never operated in any point in time, in a comprehensive way. And I mean, when we're talking about tough on crime policies, right, that are anti-Black, right, because they target and have a disproportionate impact on Black people, right, those tough on crime policies that were first initiated, well, in the 70s, but definitely in the 80s, right, many of those policies and practices were also supported, unfortunately, by members of the Black community, Black leaders in our community, Black pastors who were tired, right, of the violence in our community and the drug use, right, and thought that the best way to address that harm and that those social problems within our community, we thought that the best way was to align ourselves with an institution that is not concerned in our true safety. And so again, when you have 1, 2, 5 good ones, it means nothing in the context of an entire system and criminal legal system that is invested and resourced, right, to arrest more people. America did not become the #1 incarcerator because we have just all of these bad people in our nation who are no good, who just happen to be predominantly Black.
Yeah.
Right? No. That's not what's happening here. Right. That's evidence of a targeted assault on certain communities, right? And so we have a responsibility to keep our communities, our people in our communities safe, right? And by not colluding with the system and relying on it, for the things that we need.
For real. I mean, we could go ahead and get the church fan and just say amen and benediction, but I do want to say a little bit of the larger topic, and I'm going to transition us by citing words from Juvie the Great, and it goes like, "The block is hot, the block is hot."
I was like, Juvie, who's that? Do tell.
Yes, girl, you look good. Won't you back that ass up?
Yeah, I got it now. Yes, the block is hot. Summertime.
Ha ha ha! Like you see.
I see it. I
Somebody need to give me 15. Is it 16 bars? They'll see I ruined it.
Oh my goodness.
12. All right. Tony is in the space, but this is what I want to translate. So hot is summertime. Am I back?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Yep.
It's hot in summertime, and across, we had a previous conversation over at DFW, but Atlanta, New Orleans, St. Louis have police departments that are gearing up for the summer for what they're naming as the increased summer surge of violent crimes. And so I saw a press release from the mayor of Atlanta, Chocolate City, right? Is that what Atlanta?
No, that's DC.
Yeah. Oh, so what is Atlanta? You know what? I'm missing the importance of the conversation. Atlanta,
Okay.
all the black.
Well,
All right.
okay.
But you know, New Orleans was Chocolate City that one time after Katrina, where the mayor,
Okay.
he was like, "We gonna make New Orleans a chocolate city again," and
Oh yeah, I
the
remember
white folks
that.
were so upset. They're like, "What do you mean, chocolate city?" And then they put him in jail for tax evasion, and then sent him to the Martha Stewart jail. I was like, "Wait,
Oh my gosh.
they put him in a regular jail." I was like, "They could have
Oh.
in the family.
Mm.
We ain't pay out
Nope.
this jail.
Nope. You see, they said you black.
You's black,
Go
right?"
back.
But they're gearing up. So in Atlanta in particular, like New Orleans is like increasing the length of policing shift, right?
Right.
Atlanta has actually hired new officers,
And
right?
they're desperate for them.
So they getting ready to flood the streets with police officers.
Right.
I'm gonna give you that and go with wherever you want to go with that, sis.
Okay, okay. Well, yeah, so summer months, right? In terms of the research around criminal activity or behavior, but criminal activity has to be detected by police, right? So there is a kind of mixed findings around the fact that during the summer months, right, there's an increase in violence or crime. And this is all dependent, right, on a host of factors. So this is not across varying communities. But this understanding shapes officers' beliefs across every city, every town, right? So they hold on to this belief, whether, no matter what your population and actual issues are within your community. And so as the summer months come, there's an intentional effort to increase policing, particularly in Black and Brown communities and in communities with higher levels of poverty, right? So the idea is that because there's more violence, right? And more kids are out of school. There are more social gatherings, right? That increases our level of interaction, right? And that increases the likelihood potentially of conflict, of problems, of violence, perhaps, right? But the
Now,
logic.
now I want to say, when the Henny in your system ain't no.
Do we need like a rap based lecture talk?
You need to hire me to follow you, sis. And then like,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, sorry, y'all. I know we having a serious conversation. Go back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let me. Okay. Where was I?
You were talking about the social gatherings, and I'm like,
yes.
Social,
the Henny's flowing, right? We know how we do, right? And so what happens, right? Because these are social dynamics. These are not things that are unique to Black people or that are unique to areas of poverty, right? This is just how social interaction happens, right? Alcohol, inhibits you, right? And can create an atmosphere for more conflict or sometimes more fun and more good things. But it's dicey, depends on what kind of how it flows. I leave that as it is. So from that, right, knowing that there's a likelihood there are more social gatherings, all of these things, right? Police ramp up and they have the mission to basically say, we need to be on alert so we can arrest more people, we can incarcerate them, and we can keep your community safe, right? This is the logic. But what we know is that punishment and arrest practices are not evenly dispersed across communities, right? Meaning that white folks and Black folks or rich folks and poor folks do not all get it the same. Police are more likely to focus and target their efforts on disenfranchised and marginalized communities, meaning that punitive justice, punishment-based initiatives that focus on more arrests, more police, more incarceration, right? More harassment, more searches, all of those activities are, the people in our community who are youth, who are Black, who are queer youth, right? They are at higher risk and more vulnerable to that level of interaction and that level of punishment from the police, right?
I want to make a really explicit dot, Michelle. Excuse me. I do want to point this out. So that
Mm-hmm.
means your baby could walk down the same street that they always walk
Yes.
down every day, doing the same thing that they always do,
Yeah.
with their little earbuds, dancing, whatever, on July 7th, and get and have an interaction
Mm-hmm.
that they wouldn't have never had 6 months ago because of something like the increased police involvement in the
That's much
community.
less likely to have occurred 6 months ago, for sure.
I just wanted to really paint that picture. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly. The
Like, well,
same
you didn't do
behaviors,
anything
right?
different. What did you do? I mean, it's the
Same
same street,
activity, right?
same
Because
T-shirt.
the belief is that people are, or the block is hot. I've been a part of police meetings, right, before they go out to their shift, and they prepare officers, right? And so mentally, they already have this adrenaline going in them. They already have this view that, and an expectation that people are going to be violent, that people are going to be difficult, and not just all people, but particularly Black people, right, and other marginalized people. And so as they police our neighborhoods, they're on alert in this way. And so, yes, that means they're looking maybe at the same behavior from a kid and looking at it through a different lens because it's the summertime and because there's an assumption that you must be up to no good, right? Where are you going? What's going on? And knowing the negative history and the historical record of police interactions with Black and queer communities, right? Our youth may be, rightfully so, on guard, right? Not willing to answer questions, not in having a positive interaction with them. We know that that only increases the likelihood of police being more aggressive with them. Oh, you're not willing to answer me? Well, get on the wall, go over here, do this, right? And of course, have children think that, basically issue out orders that are unlawful, right? And just expecting people to, just mold to their will, right? And so when they get any pushback, that definitely increases the likelihood of aggression happening in their interaction, right? And again, the idea is that by surveilling people more, by arresting them more, right, then we are able to keep our community safe. But what we have to know is that policing only replicates harm, right? It does not solve the problem. Even if a child is engaged in harmful behavior, right, we need to look at that as an opportunity not to police them, right? Not to arrest them and then put them back in the same situation with even less resources and think that that's going to solve anything. No, we need to figure out how can we address the root problem of this issue to actually cultivate safety, right? And without the police, because we have the power to build safer communities, right? We have the power when we know, and I think it's really about us defining what is community safety and what does it look like for us? What does it feel like? Right? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a part of a safer community? We have to be specific about that. If we're saying, or are we saying that it means that our children need to be at risk of more harassment by police? Does that make them feel safe? Right? Because community safety is also really us asking about justice. What does justice look like in our community? Because when there's justice, there's peace, right? Like that comes before the peace and the community safety. And when we're focused on justice, that requires us to prioritize and center the most marginalized people in our community, right? Look at them and their needs and say, how can we address them to then cultivate safety?
I also think that there's a component of this where we have to address the internalized anti-Blackness in ourselves, right?
Yes.
It's that we've been taught, I say we've drunk in the same water, unfortunately, same well, yeah? And so to the extent that we don't think we deserve, right, or like the fullness of protection, right? And so we'll watch police handle us and say things like, well, I mean, you know, he deserved this or that. And so I just think, and I mean, that's complicated, right? But I'm just saying, like, there's a part where we have to be honest that sometimes we accept like
Yes.
the violence of these institutions because we've been taught that that's what we deserve.
Yes.
One of the most powerful conversations I had last year was with my friend Hannah, and she talked about growing up in LA in the school system and having a hard time and thinking it was her. She just thought she wasn't smart enough and she wasn't good,
Mm,
wasn't disciplined enough. And then as she got older and learned more about education, she realized like the whole time it wasn't me, it was the system.
mm-hmm.
I feel like at every chance we get to do that, Michelle, to say to our community, it's not you, it's the system.
And in saying that, also we need to interrogate ourselves, right? And this isn't about, putting any blame on us for police violence, but recognizing the contributing factors to that, and recognizing that we cannot participate and uplift, right, this form of justice, right, in our communities because we think that that's what it's supposed to be, right? And basically where we start to invest in this punishment based justice, and in doing that, right, what happens is that we can't just essentially say like, oh, it's the system, like as or if we know that, oh, the system is causing these problems, we also have to think about how are we a part of that system.
Yeah.
How are we complicit in that system? How are we contributing to it? Because like I said, there are so many different ways that we have as a community, right? And one key way, right? One thing that I want parents and just members of the Black community to know who are dealing with youth or just in general, right? Just our not only our youth, but all Black folks, right? We have to know that as we are seeking justice and safety in our community, right? Everybody wants that, right? No one wants to, walk down the street or be a part of a community that is unsafe and feel like we are at risk of theft or, any type of other harm. But, right, as we are thinking about that, as we were thinking about safety, we can't basically perpetuate the idea that when someone does cause harm, when someone does do something wrong, right, in whatever capacity it is, right, that as a result, they're no good. They're now this bad, no good person, right? Because this is what oppressive systems do to dehumanize us. So then we start to do the job of white supremacy and oppression, right? By saying, oh yeah, because think about how we speak about people who we label as criminals, right? Those no good people, those bottom of the barrel, they're no good. Oh, that youth, why would they engage in that? Who are they? This is terrible. You're making us look bad, right? And with that dehumanization, though, what happens is that then translates, right? When we're able to view someone as less than, then that opens up the floodgates for more abuse, more mistreatment, right? And punishment systems. Because, and we sign off on it by
Yep.
saying, oh, well,
Co-sign. Yep.
right. Oh, those, they engage in this. So therefore, yeah, they should be removed from our community. They're no good. We don't want them here. But the majority of people who go to jail, right, are coming out at some point and they're returning to our communities with even less resources, with even more resentment, with even less social support. And we think that that's going to cultivate safety in the long run. No. So we have to invest in long-term community safety strategies. And we do that, one, in part by, at the cultural and belief level of not feeding into this idea that people who engage in harm are no good and disposable, right? Because white supremacy takes that and it frames it very specifically on who is disposable. Right. And what that means is that Black people are the most likely to experience the negative impact of that. So even when we, think that we're doing, we have our best interests for our communities, we want to be safe, but we're contributing to harm in the long term.
Yeah.
Right? Because going back to our conversation, earlier, right, we're talking about labeling theory, right? And talking about this idea that if you have this assumption, right, if law enforcement agencies and we have an assumption that certain groups of people or our youth or our certain communities are bad, sketchy, right, dangerous, right, and we put that label on them and we say that that's just who those people are. Well, as people are growing up in that, what beliefs are they internalizing about themselves, right? What are they learning? And to where at some point it can become, well, if this is how you see me, if this is how you view me, if this is what you think of me, and this is how I'm being treated consistently, I might as well fulfill it, right? I might as well go ahead and actually embody that label that you've put on me because you're not allowing me to be anyone else, right? And so simply because there's harm or violence in our community does not mean that there should also be an opportunity for policing, right? We need to look at these social problems and say, how can we solve them through resources, right? How can we address the root causes of these issues at the cultural level, at the systemic level, when we're talking about practices and policies, right? All of these things matter to our collective safety.
I am so happy to have had you in the space with me, and I want to encourage people to learn from you, to support you. I lost your Cash App information was like
Mm-hmm.
copied, and I pasted it before, but then I
Oh, okay.
lost it, and so
Mm-hmm.
I will, when I repin this, I'm gonna like reshare that in the.
Okay.
But how
Thank
can
you.
people follow you and support your work?
Sure. So you can follow me at Passion and Power. And over there, that's where I do work to really help people own their power for change and show up to dismantle, these oppressive systems, whether they be white supremacy, patriarchy, right? Punitive justice, anti-Blackness, all of the things. Doing that work over there, is really important for not only, our safety today, but what we're building for future generations, right? So if you're really wanting to learn how to be active in your pursuit of justice and what that looks like, even as a Black person who is not benefiting from systems of oppression, but understanding what is your role in this work, right? Because again, we do all still have a role in this and can participate and be complicit in these systems. And in fighting and dismantling oppression, it also means how are we doing the work to support one another, right? How are we not only breaking down, harmful systems, but what are we working to build up? So if you're interested in kind of doing that work, connecting with the community, you can learn more about my trainings and my community workshops at passionandpowerus.com. You can also just click the link in my bio. I actually have an event coming up next weekend called Activating Real Justice for Black Liberation. So this is going to be where we are unpacking what is restorative justice, how do we practice it, how do you start to activate accountability in your community so that Black, queer, and other marginalized people can live safe, thriving lives. So yeah, I'm really excited to connect with everyone. Appreciate those who have already supported, followed me, cash apped me, all the things for my labor. I appreciate that.
I feel like we got to end on some lyrics, like
Oh,
I did my bars. Do you have any bars? Like you want to spit for the people before we go?
there's no tequila here, so that may be the after sessions, after dark. I don't know. Let me see. Let me think. Let me put me on the spot. Put me on the spot.
You were talking about you was young and cool and hip earlier,
I
sis.
know. Yeah. I set myself up, didn't I? Well,
You know what? That's
um,
how we go live together. That's how we start. We gonna start.
okay. I'm ready now
You know what I'm saying?
because I'm ready. I'm ready. I could spit after some tequila and things. Oh, I
Okay.
ask about me, okay? I be flowing, so
Look, they don't
coming
look.
next.
They don't look. You don't want me to pull some UGK out of the box.
Oh,
Box.
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I can't.
Listen, y'all stay black, stay safe, stay aware.
Yes.
Know that we deserve full humanity out here in these streets, and
Yes.
by any means necessary.
Any means necessary. Another live.
Night, y'all.
All right. Thanks so much.